In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on February 26th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Tampa Bay Lightning versus Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina and Tampa meeting here feels less like a regular date on the schedule and more like a little playoff preview with bright lights and big mood. One bench has that hot streak swagger, the kind of role where every bounce seems to find a friendly stick and everyone starts talking like the heater might never stop. The other bench has that slow burn confidence, the kind that comes from stacking home wins, leaning on a system that has been drilled in for years, and knowing the building itself can tilt the ice when the crowd gets going. Tampa's recent run makes a lot of sense for anyone who loves momentum, recent wins on the road, good vibes in the room, and a history of showing up well in this matchup. Carolina, though, leans on something a little different, a repeatable kind of edge built on layers of structure, heavy pressure, and a style that holds up even when the puck luck is not friendly. The Lightning still bring more star glow on paper, the kind of names casual fans latch onto right away, and that alone pulls attention and, usually, public money. The Hurricanes counter with depth that keeps coming in waves, lines that can all check, skate, and create, and a blueprint that does not crumble when one guy has an off night. Injuries tilt that balance in subtle ways, too. Tampa's absences and question marks down the middle and on the back end tug at the very spine of how they like to play, even if the top skill is still very much intact and dangerous. Carolina's own missing pieces hit more in the supporting cast, which still matters, but their core identity stays mostly intact, and that matters when the game tightens and every mistake feels huge. Home ice folds into this story as well. The Hurricanes tend to feed off their crowd, roll their matchups, and lean into that grinding forecheck that wears on visiting legs shift after shift. The Lightning can absolutely punch back, and they have the talent to flip a game with one rush or one power play, but the more the night looks like a long, honest, 5-on-5 battle, the more it suits the team that thrives on structure and layers. It might look like a perfect chance to ride the road heater. The deeper you look, though, the more the steady, home side profile feels like the one that is built to handle the ebbs, the flows, and the nerves of a big stage spot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. On one hand, you have two clubs that know how to lock in, with goalies capable of stealing scenes and coaches who can squeeze the ice when they have to. On the other hand, you are looking at two of the more dangerous attacks around, groups that can turn a quiet stretch into chaos in about 30 seconds if a turnover pops up in the wrong spot. Tampa brings that sharp, high-skill edge in the offensive zone, quick puck movement, east-west passes that force defenders to twist, and a power play that punishes even a lazy stick or a tired change. Carolina brings a different kind of pressure, more like a constant storm. Shot volume from everywhere, pucks funneled from the points with bodies layered in front, and shifts where the puck seems glued in the offensive end for whole minutes. That contrast creates a strange mix, one team slicing with precision, the other grinding with volume, but both styles tend to lead to chances, rebounds, deflections, and second efforts in the slot. There is a small tug of war between history and the current season flow. Past meetings in this building have leaned toward tighter final scores, the kind of nights where one bounce, one tip, or one scramble in front of the net decides it. This season's versions of these teams, though, feel a bit more open, with Tampa living in high-event games more often and Carolina's home contests turning into long stretches of pressure that eventually break something loose. Special teams sit right in the middle of that push and pull, because a couple of penalties on either side can turn a careful, measured game into a track meet before anyone can adjust. If whistle volume stays low and both teams stay disciplined, things might skew closer to a controlled pace, with defenses winning more of the small battles. The moment one side chases, though, the ice can stretch out, and rush chances, pulled goalies, and late-game desperation start piling more shots and more chances on the board. With two strong offenses, active blue lines, and the kind of skill that does not need many looks to cash in, the safer assumption is not that the game will stay quiet, but that the pressure and talent eventually force the scoreboard to keep moving. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Columbus Blue Jackets versus Boston Bruins. Picture TD Garden on a Thursday night, lights sharp, crowd already humming before the puck even drops. Boston is right back in that familiar role of home favorite, with all the extra weight that comes with everyone assuming they should handle business on their own ice. Columbus shows up as more than just background noise, a team with a solid story, competitive in their division, and very much convinced it belongs in this kind of game instead of just hoping to hang around. It is not only about who has the better record, it is about who is more comfortable in this specific setting and who has been living in this type of pressure for months. Boston has been stacking home wins, crossing that 20 mark in their own building, and it feels like they know every bounce off those boards by muscle memory now. Columbus on the road has been fine, not terrible, just hovering a little over the break-even point away from home, which is respectable but not exactly intimidating when you walk into a building like this. You add short travel for Boston, the routine of sleeping in their own beds, and a fan base that pretty much expects 2 points when they file into those seats, and the ice tilts emotionally before the anthem even finishes. Honestly, that kind of environment matters more than people admit, because it lets the Bruins play like themselves without chasing the game from the opening shift. Here is the thing, this version of Boston feels less like some unstoppable juggernaut and more like a slightly flawed favorite that still knows how to win when it counts. They usually put up a bit more than 3 goals a night and give up somewhere around that same number, so their wins come from well-timed bursts and those classic 5-minute waves rather than from a slow suffocation style. It is like watching a team that flips a switch for a stretch, turns the volume way up, and then rides that surge instead of locking everything down for 60 minutes. Columbus rolls in on a heater, no doubt, with a mix of shutouts and big number nights that look fantastic in a box score, but those kinds of extremes can be noisy when you try to project what really carries over. The Jackets are walking into a rink where Boston has the history, the comfort, and that annoying habit for opponents of taking over a game in a 5 to 10 minute blast of shots and zone time. Nothing is guaranteed in betting. It is always a probability game, not a promise. But when you stack up the home dominance, the matchup context, and how often Boston answers after rough stretches away from home, the balance of this matchup clearly leans one way. As our first pick for this matchup, the Boston Bruins money line is our full game side pick. Both of these teams lean more toward the mindset of we will outscore you than we will grind out a 2-1 snoozer and love it, especially this season. Their overall scoring profiles tell the same story. Each side usually lands just over 3 goals scored and gives up close to 3 as well, so the default script involves genuine chances at both ends instead of a slow, patient chess match in the neutral zone. If you have watched them lately, you can almost feel that expectation that someone is going to break free, not that everything will stay bottled up for long. Recent runs only reinforce that feel. Columbus has had multiple games with 6 or more combined goals in their last handful of outings, a strange cocktail of explosive wins mixed with quieter shutouts that still push totals into interesting territory. Boston has gone even louder, with 4 of their last 5 games hitting at least 7 total goals, and some of those nights looked like defense decided to take a back seat while both teams traded chances at full speed. Games like that do not feel like random chaos. They line up with the bigger story of a Bruins team that is no longer winning every single night by strangling games to 2-1, and a Jackets squad that is comfortable pushing the tempo even when the setting is tough. Add Boston's strong scoring presence at home to Columbus' tendency to open things up in the second and third periods when chasing the game, and the shape of this matchup starts to look a lot more like runs, power play opportunities, and frantic third-period shifts than a quiet evening of low-shot totals. Let me explain. When both sides bring that kind of rhythm, with goals for and goals against averages living in that 3-goal neighborhood and recent totals repeatedly sneaking into the high range, it naturally points toward a night where the scoreboard operator is busy and the goal horn gets plenty of work. It is still a projection based on this season's data and recent game flow, not a guarantee, but blending those tendencies with the situational spot paints a pretty clear picture of how this one is most likely to play out. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. New York Islanders versus Montreal Canadiens. This matchup has that fun, split personality feel to it, like two very different teams trying to prove their way works better. Montreal comes in riding a season that looks lively on paper, sitting second in the Atlantic at 32-17-8, and they have been leaning into that offensive identity all year. They score about 3.46 goals per game, which puts them near the top of the league, but they also give up just over 3.2 a night, which keeps their games messy and a little too open for comfort. New York shows up with a very different profile, a 32-21-5 mark built on quieter, more deliberate hockey, around 2.84 goals scored per game and only 2.71 allowed, which keeps things under control and forces opponents to work for every inch of ice. The thing that makes this so interesting for a side pick is how those identities collide. Montreal loves to trade chances, push off the rush, and let the crowd ride the emotional waves. New York prefers to shrink the rink, clog up the middle, and turn the game into a long, slow squeeze, and that style usually travels well because it does not rely on crowd energy or streaky shooting to show up. When you have one team that thrives in chaos and another that lives on structure, the team that dictates pace often ends up deciding the story. Goaltending tilts that battle even more. New York leans on a top-tier starter who is sitting around a 2.44 goals against average with a .916 save percentage, numbers that speak to both his quality and the way the team defends in front of him. That kind of safety net allows the Islanders to be patient, almost stubbornly patient, and wait for mistakes. Montreal, on the other hand, has been more volatile in their own end, which is part of why their overall defensive numbers lag behind their offense. Injuries layer more weight onto that scale. Montreal still has to navigate key absences like Patrick Lane, on injured reserve after core surgery with a recovery window that pushes into late February, and Alex Newhook, also on injured reserve with an ankle issue running into mid-March. They can still create chances, no doubt, but some of the scoring depth that made them so dangerous earlier in the season is not fully available. New York has injuries of their own, including at least one established forward on injured reserve, yet their main defensive core and primary goaltender are intact, which keeps their identity firmly in place. Both teams have been sitting for a while, with the Islanders last playing in early February and the Canadiens also off since the first week of the month, so any talk about momentum is mostly noise here. Long breaks can scramble timing for fast, free-flowing teams, while system-driven groups that lean on structure often find it a bit easier to reset and plug back into what they already do well. In a spot where the crowd, the jerseys, and the highlight reels might nudge you toward the flashier home side, the quieter road team brings a sturdier profile, a clearer edge in net, and a style that specifically targets Montreal's biggest weakness, that loose defensive play. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Islanders money line is our full game side pick. Montreal's season numbers suggest fireworks, with those 3.46 goals scored per game and around 3.21 allowed, making their average night land close to 6.67 total goals. New York pulls that back toward earth, sitting near 2.84 goals scored and 2.71 allowed, for a much calmer average around 5.55 total goals. So on paper, it feels like one team wants a track meet while the other prefers a chess match, and the final rhythm usually lands somewhere in the middle. Shot volume quietly supports a more muted scoring script. Neither side is a shot-happy machine. New York averages roughly 27.7 shots per game. Montreal sits around 26.3, and that kind of volume usually caps the ceiling unless goaltending completely falls apart. Fewer pucks on net means each mistake matters more, but it also means you need a very high finishing rate to push the score into a true shootout. Special teams add another wrinkle that actually leans away from a wild total. Montreal's power play has been a real weapon, sitting in the top group in the league with about 39 power play goals and around 24% efficiency. And they are not shy about drawing and taking penalties, with games often featuring more than 4 calls on their side alone. New York counters with a strong penalty kill and a power play that has struggled to turn chances into automatic damage. That mix sounds a little odd at first, but it ends up protecting the scoreboard. Montreal's best path to a high-scoring game is piling up power play goals, yet New York does not take a ton of penalties and defends those situations well, while the Islanders do not fully punish the Canadiens for their own penalty issues because their power play is not firing at an elite clip. Goaltending again plays a big part in how many red lights we actually see. New York's starter has those elite numbers, with that 2.44 goals against average and .916 save percentage, and his style tends to smother second chances and calm things down when games start to tilt. Montreal's young netminder has been more up and down, sitting near a 2.96 goals against average with about a .892 save percentage, which introduces some volatility but not enough by itself to guarantee a scoring explosion. For a game to really spiral into a high total, you usually need both sides to cooperate, either through defensive breakdowns on both benches or through a parade of odd-man rushes that never stops. Here, one side is built to prevent exactly that kind of chaos. The long layoff for both clubs adds another little nudge toward a cooler scoreboard. Timing on passes, finishing in tight, and one-touch plays around the slot often take a game or so to fully return after a break, while defensive habits and simple structure tend to survive time off a bit better. So you get a setting where both teams can skate, both can generate, but clean execution in high-danger areas is just a bit less sharp than usual. Put all of that together, the lower shot counts, the strong defensive backbone and high-end goaltending on one side, the penalty kill matchups that blunt Montreal's best scoring lever, and the natural rust that can creep in after a layoff, and the more likely script is a game that lands in that 3-2 or 3-1 neighborhood rather than something that looks like a goal fest from a video game. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Detroit Red Wings versus Ottawa Senators. When you look at this matchup, it feels less like a random regular season game and more like a little test of who actually figured themselves out before the Olympic shutdown. Detroit rolls in with a record of 33-19-6, Ottawa with 28-22-7, and the surface level story is pretty simple. The Senators are at home, they have that familiar building, that familiar crowd, and a recent run that makes them look like the rightful favorite. The Red Wings, on the other hand, have been wobbling a bit, and it is very easy to look at recent results on your app and convince yourself they are cooling off at the wrong time. That is the shallow read, though, and this matchup deserves better than a shallow read. Detroit has already taken both meetings this season, each time by a 4-3 score, one in Ottawa and one in Detroit. That is not nothing. Playing a team twice, solving them twice, in two different buildings, tells you something about how your style meshes with theirs. The Red Wings do not need the game to spiral into chaos to be dangerous. They are comfortable in that slightly uncomfortable middle ground where their structure is good enough to hold, but their skill still finds ways to break through. Ottawa skews much more toward volatility. They can look incredible for long stretches, creating rush chances and feeding off the building, then suddenly give up a flurry the other way and have to dig themselves out. You can almost feel it when you watch them. It is exciting, sure, but it also leaves the door open for a team that keeps its head when the game starts swinging. Detroit's profile is more balanced, the scoring and the defending are closer to each other, and that balance matters against an opponent that thrives on swings rather than on patience. In net, Detroit leans on a tandem that is more calming than flashy. John Gibson has settled in with numbers in that mid-2 range on goals against and a save percentage a bit over .900, which is not video game stuff, but it is exactly the kind of steady baseline you want when your team already believes it can win on structure. Cam Talbot behind him gives them a veteran presence who has seen just about everything. You do not need both goalies to be superheroes when the system in front of them is relatively honest. Ottawa's combo of Linus Ullmark and James Reimer has plenty of talent and experience, but it comes with more variance. One night looking rock solid, another night feeling like every deflection could sneak through. Over a long season, that volatility is fine, but in a single game spot like this, it can tilt the feel of the matchup. The injury sheet adds a small wrinkle that most people glance over, then promptly forget. Detroit has Simon Edvinsson listed on injured reserve with an estimated return right around this date, and reports of him fully participating in practice during the Olympic break give this a probable return vibe rather than a distant hope. That is a big-body defender stepping back into the rotation, the sort of piece that quietly cleans up mistakes and lets your better puck movers play a little freer. Ottawa, by contrast, is without Nicolas Matinpalo on the blue line and, more notably, David Perrin up front after sports hernia surgery, with his timeline stretching into March. Losing a veteran winger with his sense for timing on offense trims a bit of edge off their attack, especially when special teams or late-game situations demand composure. None of these names will dominate headlines, but taken together, they tug the matchup subtly in one direction. Zoom out and look at the schedule context, and it gets even more interesting. Both teams are stepping back into regular season play right after the league shut everything down for the Winter Olympics, from early February until games resumed in late February. That kind of pause is awkward. Rhythm disappears, habits get a little rusty, and coaching staffs lean hard on familiar structure instead of cute new wrinkles. Home ice and recent momentum are already baked into how people see Ottawa. The market tends to love the comfortable favorite that should get it done at home. What does not always show up in that first impression is the way Detroit's more stable defensive ceiling, their special teams matchup, and their proven ability to handle this exact opponent make them the more interesting side if you are willing to go against the grain. As our first pick for this matchup, the Detroit Red Wings money line is our full game side pick. On the surface, everything about these teams screams that you should expect goals. Ottawa averages a bit north of 3.3 goals per game and allows a touch over 3.2, which is basically a standing invitation to wild nights. Detroit sits closer to 3 scored and 3 allowed, so if you only look at season-long numbers, you imagine a game that leans high scoring more often than not. Their head-to-head meetings fit that mental picture, both landing at 4-3, with momentum swings, lead changes, and plenty of stress for whoever had the live under ticket. Recent form, though, tells a slightly different story, and it is worth listening to that whisper. Before the Olympic break, Detroit's last 5 games produced totals of 5, 2, 5, 7, and 4 goals. 4 of those 5 games finished with 5 or fewer. Only one truly pushed into track meet territory. Ottawa's last 5 ended on goal counts of 3, 7, 5, 5, and 7. There are still a couple of fun, high-scoring scripts in there, but 3 of those games stayed at or under 5 goals, which is not exactly the non-stop fireworks show that their reputation suggests. Sometimes teams that are known for chaos try to tamp things down once the stakes and fatigue rise. Special teams sit right in the middle of this scoring puzzle. Detroit's penalty kill hovers just under 80%, which is not elite, but it is comfortably solid, especially when paired with a structured 5-on-5 approach. Ottawa's penalty kill trails behind in the mid-70s, and that kind of gap shapes how both coaches think about risk. Both power plays live in a healthy low 20% range, so each side knows it can punish sloppy penalties. That dynamic often nudges games toward a slightly more cautious whistle, more chess, less pond hockey. When players know that one bad stick or lazy backcheck can flip the entire tone of a game, the pace naturally tightens up, even if the star talent on the ice screams go, go, go. Personnel details line up with that tilt toward a tighter script. Ottawa is still without David Perron as he works back from sports hernia surgery, sidelined on a 5 to 7 week timeline that stretches past this matchup. He is one of those veteran forwards who might not dominate every highlight package, but he understands when to slow a play down, when to pull a puck off the wall, when to hit a seam. Take that piece out of a power play or a late offensive zone possession and the chances still come, but the polish sometimes does not. Nicholas Matin-Palo being out on the back end removes a depth option, and while that does not completely change their defensive identity, it shortens the rotation and can show up in tired legs late in periods. On the other side, Detroit likely folds Simon Edvinsson back into the lineup, which gives them another long defender who can close gaps and make clean exits that kill cycles before they turn into extended pressure. Goaltending ties a big bow on the whole scoring question. Gibson has already reminded people this season that he can turn a game into a grind almost by himself, including a recent shutout of Colorado where he calmly erased chance after chance without much drama. Those nights are not noisy, but they are brutally effective if you are holding a ticket that needs a quieter total. Ullmark, when he starts, has a well-documented ability to raise the floor of a game, living in that zone where he may not steal every night, but he very rarely lets a game completely unravel. Add in James Reimer, who brings another veteran layer to the crease rotation, and you get a goaltending landscape that can absolutely smother spurts of momentum. Now drop all of that into a spot where every skater is just coming out of an extended Olympic layoff, hands a little stiff, timing just a hair off, and you can almost picture those early missed passes and bobbled one-timers. Those tiny bits of rust do not always show up in the box score preview, but they matter when you are trying to guess whether this turns into a barn burner or a slower, more deliberate kind of hockey night. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Minnesota Wild versus Colorado Avalanche. Ball Arena sets the stage tonight for something that feels a lot closer to a playoff test than a regular season checkbox. Two teams that know each other's habits walk in, and you can almost feel both benches treating this as a measuring stick game, even if nobody will admit it. Colorado is at home, in the altitude, in front of a crowd that expects the tempo to tilt their way, and that expectation kind of seeps into how they play from the first shift. The market still leans their way, and that is with the built-in respect already adjusted for the obvious stuff, which matters because it tells you people are not exactly racing to fade them in this building. The twist, of course, is that they are doing this without their superstar in the middle. That absence is not a surprise announcement. It is already baked into how people are looking at the matchup, and it shifts the story from can they survive without him to is what they still have enough against this specific opponent. Honestly, that is where Colorado's style starts to matter more than the names on the back of the jerseys. They stack up shot volume, they lean on wave after wave of pressure, and they tend to force visiting teams into long shifts in their own zone that feel like trying to clear snow with a spoon. Minnesota, on the other side, brings a profile that travels pretty well, but in a very different way. They are comfortable grinding, then suddenly flipping a puck into a dangerous area and turning one small mistake into momentum. They have been in good rhythm, they come in confident, and they are used to hanging around in games where they absorb a little more than they give for stretches, then punch back hard. That kind of style can absolutely frustrate a high-octane home side, especially if the visiting bench stays patient and does not chase every rush. Here is the thing though, when you layer in the personnel notes, the picture nudges toward one side. Colorado's defensive group looks more stable, their structure in front of their goalies has held up, and they have kept the average against number very tidy even in nights where their offense was not fully humming. Minnesota, missing some of that trusted defensive backbone and some of that heavy forechecking edge, feels a little thinner in the spots that matter most when you are trying to weather long stretches in your zone. Over 60 minutes in this building, with Colorado's habit of tilting the ice and Minnesota needing a lot of efficient counterpunching, the percentage lean points toward the home side handling the number rather than just surviving the matchup. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado Avalanche money line is our full game side pick. You have two offenses that are very comfortable getting on the board, and their season scoring rates already tell you that multiple goals from each side is not some wild outcome, it is just kind of their baseline. Colorado at home likes to press, they throw pucks on net from everywhere, and that constant pressure tends to drag whoever visits into a faster game than they might have drawn up on the whiteboard. Minnesota comes in riding a stretch where the puck has been jumping off their sticks, and that kind of confidence usually shows up as extra aggression at the blue lines and a willingness to keep pushing instead of nursing a quiet game. Let me explain why that matters for the total. When a team like Colorado plays at that pace, you get more shots, more rushes, more odd bounces, and more broken plays. Those are the exact situations that turn a careful 2-to-1 type script into something that suddenly looks 4-to-3 before anyone has really tapped the brakes. Even when Colorado's defensive game is sharp, their attacking mindset leaves room for back-and-forth stretches, and we have seen them win both tight games and wild ones with plenty of red lights. Special teams sprinkle a little more fuel on it. Both groups have power plays that can punish careless penalties and penalty kills that are aggressive enough to create chances the other way too. That combination does not always show up as a number on a spreadsheet, but if you have watched enough of their games, you know those 2 minutes can swing totals all by themselves. One bad line change, one tired stick, and a harmless-looking minor turns into a backdoor tap-in or a rebound scramble that flips the entire rhythm of a period. Game script late is another piece of the puzzle. If Colorado gets out front, they are not exactly famous for sitting back and trapping the life out of the game. They usually keep pressing with their top groups and force the other team to stretch. If Minnesota trails, they have enough offense to chase, and that leads to extra attackers, riskier pinches, and those frantic last 2 minutes where the net is empty and every cleared puck has a chance to slide in from 60 feet. Those little chaos pockets are where totals get decided, especially in matchups where the offensive talent on both benches is good enough to make one more play. Put all that together, the attacking confidence, the tempo at altitude, the dangerous power plays, and the likelihood of a stretched third period if the scoreboard is tilted, and it leans toward a game where the total is more likely to be pushed upward than kept under lock and key. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.